Okay, we are recording and you see my screen, is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, thank you both for making time this morning.
Yeah, sure.
So I looked through everything that you sent this morning. Shay, do you want to, I don't know, Renee, have you had time to take a look and try to make sense?
I have a little bit. I think it'd be helpful for a little bit of orientation.
Okay.
But I did look over for the last 30 minutes or so. So I'm not completely foreign to the document. Thank you, Shay.
Yeah, so I'm going to send you a new version where I've gone through and kind of highlighted stuff in red, it's just things that we need to probably discuss and I have questions about, more or less.
Okay.
So let me send that to you right now.
I wonder if I could just have you take over the screen.
Yeah, we can try that.
Yeah, I can make you the presenter. Here we go.
Okay. Yeah, and then you could send it and we can look at it later too, but that'll work.
To become a presenter, please download a small extension.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Oh, maybe not. Just kidding.
No, it's not a big deal. It has something to do with Google Chrome. Here. Okay. Question is, can you see my screen? No?
I see yours.
Okay, you see me. All right, so I'm sharing right now.
Just yeah, maximize the Word document would be good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. So I'm at the top. I just sent you an updated version. Its file name is the same, so just replace the one that you have.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Shay, if you wanna drive and show us what you got.
Yeah, sure. So I went through. I have took Christian's breakdown of all of the variables and went through kind of I think the most important ones. And so first page, I did this very condensed to just separate things out, and in a more professional format for a publication. I would probably change things a little bit, but for right now, just getting through it. This is how I set it up. So the first page is just the first section where it's the physical activity and the natural environment, that kind of pile of variables that fit in natural environment. And there's two tables here. One's the female on the bottom, the male on top. And you'll see this is just correlational tables with mean, standard deviation, and the overall N each level. And the reason the number changes is because SAS uses a pairwise technique as the default. So it'll use it just uses all available information. So, and that's based on the full number that you have that it has. So if there's any missingness, it excludes missing. There's ways to add missingness. And so if you're looking at it, I have it as red now. So some of the ones that I've highlighted in red, which is really interesting. So the first column is really the one we're most interested in, because that's our male physical activity 2011. And we can see how things are related to it in that natural environment kind of profile. Is how I kind of thought about them. And right out the gate, it's looking really good. Everything, and if you see anything with a star, like right here, that's considered non-significant, likely not matter, but it's just for context of how these things are all related to themselves through bivariate correlational analysis. And the things I've highlighted in red they were concerned because you have potential multi-linearity issues. Mm-hmm. And so those are things we need to consider when we move forward for a final model where you're looking at it and say, well, a good example is you have maximum air temperature, maximum heat index, and then you have percentage of the heat index. And you can see those things are really very closely related to each other. So in the end, you may only need one of these. As you can see, there are correlations, at least against males and females. There's not much difference there.
Mm-hmm.
Talking 0.02. These ones are identical, and so you'd ultimately pick one. And then also moving forward, do things like variance inflation factor to just make sure how strongly they influence. And what that does is when we go to actually run the final models or build our models, it helps us get to a place where we can say, at least from a statistical point, justify the removal or inclusion, rather, of whichever variables we're looking at. So is everyone caught up so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any questions so far?
Nope. You're striving for parsimony. Understood.
Okay. Yep, exactly. What I thought was really cool, which would make complete sense, is that you have a perfect inverse correlation between land and water, between each other. I thought it was like, well, that would make complete sense, right? Because you can't have one or the other, right? So that's really neat. Things mash out from a data point of view. Anyway, yeah, we can see we'll have to ultimately think about how we use land and water. If they have more water, it seems that physical activity improves. Is that what we're saying? That's what it's showing us.
Yep.
Because it's inverse with land.
Yep.
So that's interesting.
Yep. Positive correlation there. Yep.
So you may run different models where one includes water and one includes land because it's probably a variance issue there. So female, slightly different in their just overall correlation. As we go down through this, essentially what I went through each one. So now we have the social environment kind of profile and how it looks against males, females. As far as these being insignificant, OUI is just not related necessarily to crime support or just single parent home, which is really interesting, which is really great because it's supportive of their independence, at least when our final model, when we think about physical activity, how they may impact physical activity. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And so we'll just keep going. Built environment, nothing strong stands out there as far as being against each other, except for these two variables: population density and house density. I'm gonna have to have Christian give me some more background on how they're collected and what they represent as far as the final, quantitatively. When we get down to the last page, I've highlighted a lot of concerns as far as their univariate statistics. Against male physical activity, everything looks good. Might be concerned they're not really strong. They're significant, but not really strong. So maybe something to consider. Again, parsimony. It's nearly identical female here. Then the last one, the social. Well, this isn't social environment. This is economy.
Mm-hmm.
Economic. Everything kind of hangs strong except for in-state. The only one that stuck out was in-county was very strongly related to in-place. So maybe just choosing in-place is not as strong as in-county. So in-county.
Hey Shay, sorry, you're breaking up a good bit again.
Oh, I am? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Try and speak microphone.
No, it's not the microphone. I think it's just the connection. Once you start scrolling and you talk, it kind of chops up. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So that would be that's probably the upload speeds issue here.
The one thing I wanted to note, the eco type on the previous page.
Yeah.
That is a nominal variable.
Okay.
Just so we know.
All right. So I mean, even if you run, I would run probably a Spearman correlation just to check it, but it's likely there's not going to be much difference. Mm-hmm. It'd be slightly inflated. So what you're seeing is relatively accurate.
Right. Okay.
So I could check that just for assurance, but it's not going to be much bigger.
Okay.
So again, but what's interesting is in-county seems to be the one that's hanging best out of all of these for both male, female, and across the other types of economic variables.
Yeah, that's the percentage of the people that work in the county they live in, basically.
Mhm.
Those are the
So,
three variables. Yep.
and then, so the last page is, this is last 2 pages. I split them again, male, female, in the analysis, but I didn't go through female. They're pretty much identical because they're not actually excuse me, they're not actually stratified.
Right.
They're just their own separate variables, so it's a little redundant. So I've just highlighted the ones in the male, because they're the same in the female, I believe.
Yep.
Anyway, so some things of concern. Sun, it's not about transformation per se, but it's just highlighting you have pretty strong range, min max differences here. The kurtosis is pushing it with that -1. It's, well, I mean, you get -3. That one's really okay. It's just more or less like, how is it collected and what does it represent?
Mm-hmm.
These are all just univariate. They use their own just descriptive analysis on itself. Another one, start to get into like support, very strongly leptokurtic. Slight concern, you have a very strong range, but that might be just because of how it's collected. What that means is that you have the majority of people a very strong peak on the distribution. So you have an extreme kind of in the middle, and it makes this very sharp peak. And that's what leptokurtic is. You see, so you have, again, so we go down to bike here. Very strong leptokurtic, very strongly skewed. I would have to look at the actual histograms and run an actual normal, I'll run a normal function, which will show the normality, but right now it's showing that these are not normal variables. Something like that may require some form of transformation to make it more normal so we can run it appropriately. Strong consideration. These ones, as far as what they look like, whether it's acceptable or it's going to mess with the parameter estimates. Again, population density, house density, these ones are crazy to me because there's huge range on them. So there's likely going to these would have to be split to some type of percentile to be able to make sense of them.
Mm-hmm. So
people in the highest, even be decatile, that's an extreme range.
Mm-hmm.
To have 69,000 compared to 0.
That's people per square mile in a county.
Yeah. So if it's people per square mile, that's likely going to have to be modified so that you can accurately describe it by groups, like those in the highest densities versus lowest densities.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the best way of doing that yet. I remember Krista doing an analysis with Alf here, and she had incomes of people, and it was everything from 0 to millions.
Right.
So it was this huge range, and the way she got around it was decatile. So that's probably going to be
Kristen, do you think that would be a space to think about some version around the definitions of rurality?
Yeah.
Categories instead of just a statistical approach?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, is the percent population in rural, and population density, housing density. So again, this was just everything in the kitchen sink as well. So I appreciate looking at it this way and the correlations. I even had notes earlier. Do we do quartiles of percent population? Do we do quintiles? Do we do a median split? Do we break it down into deciles? As our this is the common problem that we keep cycling back to, right, Renee? It's how do we define rural? Do we look at it differently by region as well? Do we do a double, quartile of rurality plus by region? Do we combine it with the RUCA code somehow?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the hard part.
No, that all of what you just said just ran through my head. And when I first was looking at the range earlier in the morning was, wow, how do you, first I was like, oh, it'll be interesting to see what we talk about this. And then there was just, how do you make it meaningful or more meaningful, I guess? But you're right, it's a reoccurring discussion in different contexts.
Yeah, and I'm even looking back at the original files and, one person per square mile. We got Alaska.
Right.
We got a whole bunch of counties in Alaska and boroughs and census districts.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah, a few in Montana. It's Alaska.
Well, I mean, is it something though that where we could talk about, and I'm not as familiar with the frontier designations, but so if there's multiple frontier designations, this might make it more complicated is where I'm going with that. But is it something where we can talk about density, the population density in terms of, does it match up with a frontier area, even if it's not designated frontier, although it probably is, but like using it that way, maybe at least on that really low population density end, and then figuring out like past that, is there a way to think about it? Because like capturing some of that to me makes sense, even if the definitions aren't perfect for other people to be able to identify with the categories.
I've never used anything with the frontier designation. Couldn't even tell you what it means, to be honest.
I've used it very, very vaguely in terms of frontier is the most rural of the rural. So when we say one person per square mile, that immediately makes me think we must be in a frontier area, and especially when you say Alaska.
I just looked it up real quick, and some rural health info. The definition is less than 7 people per square mile.
Yeah.
And it's basically the middle of Texas. If you draw a line straight north to the border with Canada, and a large chunk between there and the middle of California, Oregon, and Washington, and almost all of Alaska.
Well, and maybe that's at least a way to handle the lower end of, and that doesn't help with the rest of the humongous range, but at least on that low end, of a meaningful way to group. And then, I don't know, I pop into all the other options you said, but and discussion points about how do you do it? Do you use pre-existing definitions? Do you go into which version of quintiles, deciles?
Yeah, I wonder how many. I bet if we look back through it, I'm looking at the original data again, how many of these most rural counties, the highest quartile, are frontier counties? And I bet you it's darn near all of them.
Which actually could be something pretty cool to be able to say, is we did look at this from a descriptive standpoint, and it actually matched really well to whichever definitions we go with, so that we can confirm the use of the definitions, if that's the way it ends up working out. And then it also gives us the justification for using those categories, if it happens to be that clean.
Okay. That's a good point. I don't know how to. Yeah. We'll have to. I think looking through the numbers might help, and adding. I don't know if we'd add another variable, frontier, or not, or if we make it almost. We have our 4 quartiles of rurality. Is there an additional designation? Right.
I would say yes on that. I would keep them together.
It's like a fifth. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not speaking from a statistical standpoint on that,
right.
Shay or Christian, but just in terms of, because I feel like when you separate it out, it then people either don't see it, or it's not included in the same concept, and I actually think it's the same general concept with lots of possible meaning within all of those different categories. But I would tend to conceptually put frontier on just the whichever side of the spectrum you're starting with, the lowest population density side, regardless of geographic location.
Okay. Yeah, we have 445 counties with fewer than 7 people per square mile. Out of a total of what, 3,000? How many are in here? 3,100 basically. I could see it being, I mean, how do we describe that though? If we go percent rural, I could see it being problematic. Why would we then say, I guess unless we do some kind of correlation to look at population that's rural. Yeah, I don't know. Shay, you're not as attached to this data as we are. What do you think?
I mean, so thinking of frontier, right? You can always separate something out and do a sensitivity analysis. And what that is you run it under the same parameters as you would for the full analysis, but it allows you to write and speak about it without it being primary focus. That makes sense. So you're still including it, and you're not omitting anything, and just write. You know, I did this in my dissertation. That's so much data, and I just had to make a decision and said for sensitivity analysis I did this. It just adds, as Alf would say, a little more meat to the bone, because you've gone above and beyond. You're not excluding anything, but it's also your way of kind of narrowing everything down so you can actually write about it, because you've got so much going on. So you can still do the analysis on the frontier depending on how it pans out. Then you can say, well, in comparison, you know, people that live in this type of conditions, you know, are very different way if you want to, you know, for comparison. That's just one way to go about it from a, you know, you're still doing everything, but as far as like, because what you guys are really talking about are the theoretical foundations of doing this work in the first place, not so much about how it's going to be analyzed or why we're analyzing it, but really setting it in stone so that the audience sees your point of view of its importance.
That makes sense to me. I mean, it makes sense that at that point it can either be this is how, make sure I'm not making something up about what you just said, Shay, but at doing that approach, we would basically be able to say this is how, when we look at basically the most rural of the most rural, the frontier areas, this is how it's similar or how it's different, or how those areas are different based on the overall analysis, correct?
Right, yeah, you run the same analysis, but what you're getting at, so I'm assuming the N in all of these is how many are the counties, right? That's what it's a representation of. Right. And, you know, knowing that you have 445, you know, what is the percentage difference, right? And you start, as soon as you start the issue becomes, once you start stratifying stuff, you start taking risks around your sample size, and then you start taking risks around your type 1 and type 2 error. That's where it becomes potentially problematic. So just as long as your definition that's why I said back, it goes barely back to the theoretical foundation of what it is that you're defining and how it's defined, so that you're kind of balancing out the best of both. So I hope I'm answering the question.
Yes. Thank you, because my question was kind of circular, so thank you for responding. I think that definitely would be one way to do it that would help address that, and then not convolute the approach for, because you were talking about the percent rurality. That was where the quartiles were from that we were just talking about, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, the two variables that stand out for me are population density and house density. They're univariate. They have their range is massive.
Mm-hmm.
Their standard deviation is crazy because the mean is based on what I've got here is there's about 259.3 people per square mile on average. But some people live near each other, but the standard deviation of that plus or minus 17, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And that causes this, that's kind of problematic because how the accuracy around that distribution, I didn't run the standard error, but I'm sure it's quite large. And that just becomes problematic when you look at this as, now the benefit to our analysis, this is going to be an independent variable. So it doesn't, its form or characteristics can very easily be modified to put it in like categories that we define and support with literature, say, in this category. And that helps us because then you can do a comparison of means after the fact. You can do a lot of post hoc with that stuff, show the differences, if there is any significant difference. So it makes sense in my mind to chop this up and to look at the groups, differences within the groups of those counties, right? So we're representing counties, not individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, does that help or hinder?
No, I'm also looking to see if either or both of those variables strongly correlate with another. And yeah, 0.2.
Yeah, so pop dense and so their relation to like female physical activity isn't very strong. It's significant, but it may be significant because the sample size is quite robust. At 3,000, you're able to probably detect minute effects.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then you look at them together, and they're almost a perfect correlation to each other. So it's kind of picking one versus the other and basing their definition off. This is how it's defined, how we chose to break it apart so that we can say people that live in this type of density defined as high density, and that's how it matches. And within that represents 3,000 counties, based on the bivariate correlation as is. Now it might change, like if you started separating this out. Mm-hmm. Right now it's based on that huge range. So in my mind, it's like, well, that's probably what's influencing correlation is the fact that it's so different between the bottom and the top. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were looking at this as separated, right, it might change. It might be different. People who live in more dense places, their physical activity would be different. Less dense places. But you have to kind of separate that and look at it. As each group, how does each group compare? Running as a reference.
All right, so we have one thing that we have to figure out is how to clean up the predictors. So yeah, Shay, thank you so much for running these and walking us through it. And I just got a half-hour warning. We have another call at noon, right, Renee?
We do?
We have another one in half an hour for our big PAPRN.
Oh, yes, we do. Sorry, I'm going, please don't tell me if we do.
Yeah.
We do. Except for we're joining, it's a NOPRN. Is that the one where it's the NOPRN presentation that we're watching instead of having an actual call? Am I right in that?
Yep.
Okay.
So we have, I guess, some choices. So what do you think next steps are, Shay, as far as you look at a lot of these predictor variables, what do you see as the next steps to do with these?
Well, I mean, the correlations are quite telltale as far as like it's really interesting when you look at what should be included in the model. You can create a threshold for yourself, like you have, let's use the economic, for example, only a few things in there. Looking at female physical activity for 2011 and how does it line up with in-state, county, place, and the economic type. I mean, you could potentially omit the in-state. See how it's quite strongly, well, it's not bad. It tells you something, right?
Yeah, there probably is not. There probably isn't a lot of variability in that variable in state, because that just means, the percentage of people that live in their county that also work in the state.
Right.
And the mean is 95.5. So I think for some of these variables, there isn't a lot of variation.
Yeah.
Right, but that's a good thing. It means there's high precision.
Well, I mean, you only have like 5% of people don't work in the state. So that doesn't tell you a lot, right?
Right. So it almost, you're right. And then it comes back to this idea of like, well, just because you have the variable doesn't mean you use it, because it doesn't tell you anything.
Right.
Substantially enough.
So do you think do you think philosophically or theoretically, sorry, not philosophically, but in theory, remove a few variables now that we've seen some of the descriptives on them, as well as according to multicollinearity, remove some of the predictors?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You're doing, you've gone and done your homework. You've got everything that you can grab.
Uh-huh.
And now you're saying to yourself, okay, when it comes to actually looking at physical activity between males and females as an outcome, what matters, and you're taking all of your independent variables into consideration, and then you say, well, these ones, if you look at the ones that are multicollinear, you'll find that the correlation between them and physical activity tend to be almost identical each time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what they're saying is, like, you're setting yourself up for you're going to have really inflated parameter estimates. Which is inaccurate, right? So you'd want to remove them. You'd want to pick one, and then you use that one. Which one has? I always go back to which one has the better definition, meaning like the clearest, most communicatable definition that people are going to be like, we picked this variable because it says X, and it's pretty common. Like house and population. You guys are more experts on that, or have more versed in that. So I don't know one I would pick, to be honest with you.
Okay. And even something like I'm really surprised that the bike and walk variables have such high skew and kurtosis.
Yep.
Because generally they cluster. I mean, I guess kurtosis, but generally they cluster down below 15 to 20%. So I was again looking back at the original data.
Yeah.
And like one county has 79% of people that walk to work. But that, I think, is just an estimate from like a really small Alaska county.
Right.
So is there also justification? And then the next one down is 48% and 42%, which are they're all in Alaska. So those are probably estimates in the small areas too. I mean, can we start to set missing variables, not missing variables, but levels of variables that we deem just theoretically out of whack?
Like Windsorizing, sort of?
Say that again?
So, like an approach to justification for Windsorizing, to where you're setting, you're capping what a realistic number would be, quantity would be within a variable, and then you're basically lowering any of the outliers based on that justification to that capped number.
Yeah. I've never heard it called Windsorizing, but if that's named after a textbook that I read that I made my students read, well, that's a shame. But
I don't think it's that Windsor, but it's an approach I had to use in my dissertation, and I've used it a few times since then. I'm not certain I ever would have found it if it hadn't been for the dissertation process.
It makes you do strange things.
Makes you do strange things that are helpful sometimes later.
So yeah, maybe just running some kind of, once we get down to as parsimonious a data set as we can think of based on theory and based on the multicollinearity that Shay has put together for us, then we can look maybe variable by variable and say, you know what, let's run, let's get the, the most, oh my gosh, variable outliers, do some kind of outlier analysis on a few of these variables and chop them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like doing it this way first is like, you're just getting familiar and you're looking at the data and what is it telling you. And, we'll use bike as an example. Like immediately I want to say like, well, the kurtosis is like crazy on that.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What is setting that up? So my next thing is I would run histograms and look at the normality of the line and, which observations are creating the max and the mins,
mm-hmm.
and why and where are they, and do they represent, if they don't fit well in a definition, or they represent the definition but they're an extreme case.
Yeah.
It makes sense to remove them. And if removal isn't an option, is there some way of transforming the variable so that it's more normalized?
Yeah.
I think kurtotic, I have this list of, I have my little cheat sheet because it's a list of different types of transformation, but I think you can use some form of Box-Cox transformation on, I think, ones that are kurtotic. What it's saying is that you get this, because it's positive, it's a really high peak.
Yep.
So you've got this extreme place where a lot of people are biking to work all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And what sets them apart, but then again, if it fits the definition well, it comes back to, it's like, well, when people, when everybody does bike to work, I think you're meeting I think, is it minimum physical activity guidelines? Is that what you're going for? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so usually the bike to work stuff will cluster at 0. So that's usually the peak, that nobody bikes to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'd have to see that one. But, yeah, I'm looking at that one. I want to go visit a few of these places, but 19.5% of people in Kalawao County, Hawaii bike to work, maybe?
Yeah.
Is that where Jack Johnson lives? I don't know. And then there's Gunnison County is next. Makes sense at 10%. Colorado, and then California, Yolo County or something. Huh.
Right. And that's what
8%.
That would make sense. Right.
But then it drops precipitously. It's like 19, 10, 8, 7, 7, 6, 6, 6, 5, 4, 3, and then I can't even tell you how many have 0. Hold on.
A lot. Yeah, it seems like a lot. Yeah.
About 1,000.
Yeah.
No,
so you have
these
extreme outliers. Right. And the way you can, depending on how you want to say it, when it's above a certain amount,
mm-hmm.
right? But then now you're playing with sample sizes, because the number that is high, high percentage, there's not very many of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of defeats the point. So it almost makes sense to have them be, removed in a way. I don't know. I'll have to do some reading on it, make sure what's the best option.
So how about, I assume if they're skewed, that's when you want to chop out. That's when you want to chop some set your delimiters, basically, what are outliers and not.
Not necessarily.
No.
Not necessarily. All the skew is showing you where the majority of people are landing. So you have a really strong positive skew. Your median is above the mean, I think. I think that's how it goes. Anyway, the point is it's just showing where your lump kind of shows. Like having, skewness isn't necessarily a problem unless, like, when it's not evenly distributed. Does that make sense? Like you get this long tail. You get these few people that represent a long outlier, right? So you may want to remove them. It just depends. Again, the population density, house density, like you have very strong skewness, kurtosis.
Mm-hmm. Just
saying that there's not really strong non-normality to those variables, and just something needs to be done where clearly the people, like, there's the difference, just descriptively looking at them, that there's extremes,
mm-hmm.
and that's potentially a problem. It's all about getting back to accuracy. Is this the true representation of the mean, right? And how close people are to that mean is really what you're really saying.
So Yeah, sorry to. I want to try to move this along so we can get to
Yeah,
our.
sure.
Sorry. So maybe Renee, why don't you and I separately take this page that Shay is showing
Yep.
and just provide comments about which variables should go and why,
Okay.
based on the previous pages of the multicollinearity, right? You have the description of the variables. I sent that, right?
Yeah. Is that the?
That's the
I
data
do.
set.
Is Excel sheet?
Say that
No.
again. Say it again, Renee.
Excel sheet. That's a Word file from last week.
It's in an Excel file that says data
It is
set. Yeah.
Perfect.
And it-
Yes, I do. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure I was thinking of the right file.
Yeah, so maybe we could take that long list that's like the last, well, it's the last 2 pages. It's just a repeat. And using the Word file, insert comments. Let's see, it's like which variable to cut and why, but also which variables to look for outliers. We don't want to cut them, but the variable is jacked up for some reason.
Okay.
Right? So we want to keep that variable, but we want to see the outlier analysis. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So 2 different assessments.
Yeah. And the reasons for cutting a variable could just be, all right, in theory, we put it in here, but it doesn't make sense now, right? Or there's multicollinearity, or the descriptives it's just not telling us anything.
Yeah. Or it's telling you the same thing, and it doesn't make sense to have both.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we want to figure out what to do. So Shay, in the data set,
Yeah.
can you add a variable that's frontier? So essentially, for any county with population density less than 7, add a variable frontier. And if it's less than 7, code it as 1, meaning it's frontier county, or 0, not a frontier county. Does that make sense?
Hold on a second here. Let me double check.
Describe it. It's good.
You want to create a frontier variable where anything less than 7 people per square mile, what this equals 0, or
No, equals 1.
when it's equal 1, and then else.
Else 0. Yep. Meaning 1 is a frontier county, 0 is not.
Sure, yeah. To see how many there are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I like that idea of, and maybe we switch it, but that idea of at least doing a sensitivity analysis to be able to speak to that, whatever that kind of does. Because I feel like that's the part of rural work that's even more forgotten, is because there's fewer of that. So if we can include some discussion around it, I think that would be very useful to those communities and to the work.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
And before we finish up, for my edification, Shay, would you mind running basically an ANOVA, just a univariate ANOVA for the independent variable would be the quartiles, the rurality quartiles. And the 2 different dependent variables would be the male physical activity and the female physical activity that you were using, just to see what's going on there without any other stuff in it.
And then, wait, which variable is that specifically that you want me to run it on?
The independent variable. Let me go back to my SPSS.
Your population density one?
No. It's the quartile, so it's the rural percentage quartiles. So in the SPSS file I sent you,
Yep.
it's rural PER quarts. Keep going up. 10, row 10, yep. And let's just see. Let's see who's winning here.
You know, and I think that just to pop a step ahead, because I know we talked about it, I think after having that ANOVA analysis and us deciding which variables to get rid of and what to kind of move forward, I think writing an abstract, I think we have enough to then say we're still moving forward with the rest of the analyses. Would you agree with that, Christian?
Totally.
Okay. So I was going to say, I know that's jumping a few steps, but I think if we can get there, we can then slow down a little bit on other, like the next few steps and building out the full model.
Yes. So Shay, can you run that real quick while we have the screen here? That ANOVA?
Yep. I'll just run it as an observe to give you an estimate.
Because then that is also an easy visual to share on our next call, our small work group call.
Yeah, which is like the whole group anyways, Christian.
Are we the only group that's doing stuff and we're the only one not getting paid?
No. I mean, I guess there's other. We're still the only work group that doesn't have anybody getting paid on it. Out of all of them. Now, there are other work groups doing things. So that'll be interesting to get that update. And Krista, just FYI, we have half-day daycare today, so I will be in and out listening, but I will not be speaking on this big call if they ever ask me to say anything.
Okay.
And might not be on the whole time. So I'm.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll start. Maybe the three. I'll start working on an abstract for active living, and then the three of us up front, and then everybody else can join on, basically.
Hey, Christian, when you do an initial outline, since it's a larger abstract, if you want to block a section or something you want me to write an initial wording on, if that's helpful, let me know. If it's not helpful, then let me know how I can be helpful.
I think it's mostly probably Shay helping briefly describe what's going on here, and then me, because it was me going behind the scenes looking at the data set and everything. And yeah, I'll let you know, because if it's ongoing, I mean, we don't have any conclusions or anything yet, right?
Right. I mean, and I think some open-ended conclusions that this will help us to hopefully those type of.
So I tell you what, you could help with, should we write something in the abstract about our group? This group. Do you want to put something together real quick for that?
Yeah, I can do that. So group sentences.
What our work group is doing? Or is that something?
No, I think that makes sense, and I think it'll help us fill space.
Okay.
And it'll also make sense from PAPRN Plus angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so throw in some PAPRN Plus.
Wednesday?
Sorry?
Can I get that to you by Wednesday?
Totally. And then I'll start filling in. And Shay, I might ask you, we're talking about an abstract for our active living conference.
Sure.
So maybe the three of us are the first three authors, and then the rest of that work group just piles on. Because they'll interpret, but I might need your help as I'm writing to describe what kind of analysis we are and will be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Enough to write up. I'm just, this is the quick and the dirty right now.
Yeah, that's what we like.
We like that.
It's rural physical activity. It's quick.
You guys are like putting me on the spot. Hey, can you run that real quick? Like, oh, he's like going to my mind, like, yeah, sassify it. Here's mail. So here's your F value. So you have model overall is statistically significant.
Mm-hmm.
You're explaining 7% of the variance overall. You want to use type 3 to correct for error. So that's your F value here. Pretty much identical.
Mm-hmm.
These are comparison between the groups. So you got some outliers in group 2, but that's the distribution. This gives you, this is the LS mean. So the least squared means you're adjusting, this is an adjustment in there. This is observed, so it's not taking population weight into consideration. This just like kind of gives us a really brief snapshot. But these are the different levels. You almost have a perfect linear line, so you get to 4.
How about
so
that?
These are your means. I don't know how you coded it, Christian.
The most rural is 4.
Gross rural is 4.
That's interesting.
So, yep. I have to run the compare. I might do a 2P. I'll look into the type of test, but you can run a different comparison in this fast, and what it does is it shows you the unique differences between all levels.
Right.
I have to look up the syntax, make sure it's right, but this is the quick and the dirty. So it's showing you that, you've got a perfect linear line. So you have urban, probably middle class America, whatever you define 3 as, and then most rural goes up, at least within their mean. But I'm not running a test to say, is mean 1 different than mean 4?
Right. That's all right.
And what it's going to do is it's going to look at, so I'll recode this so that it runs as a reference. So whichever one is you want to be most, however you want to do it, doesn't matter to me.
No, this is fine. This is fine.
If you want, yeah, but 1 equals most urban.
Yep.
Okay, let me make it up real quick. And so from that, what I'll do is I'll recode it so that 1 is essentially the referent group. And what it will do is it will run comparisons, all of these comparisons against that referent group. And actually run it against each other too.
Right. Yeah, so if you could produce, sorry, I'm just trying to finish up here.
Yeah.
So if you could produce a real simple table and chart like that for male and female, it would just be it's a conversation point. It doesn't have to be perfect yet.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll pull the graphic. I'll pull the table from SAS. It's pretty easy to understand. But yeah, when I get that, it actually compares all of these against each other, and you can see the significant level comparison of means, and that's all it's doing.
Yep. And one last discussion chart that I'd ask you to do is the same kind of analysis, the same ANOVA kind of thing, but the dependent variable is the percentage of the population that's rural. I just want to see where the quartile, how it breaks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, which one?
Keep going at 20 down to like 17, 18, 19. Hold
right
on.
Here.
20.
You want 20.
Row 20. Yeah. So that's what the quartile variable is based on. But
yep.
I'm just curious what the.
You want that to be the DV?
Yes.
I'm gonna have to change that. It's not gonna be happy with that one.
Yeah.
It might not run. Hold on a sec. Where's my?
Yeah, Shay, don't worry about doing it right now.
Got it right now.
Yeah, because I want to get take a quick break before this noon call here.
Yeah, sure. I got to go back in and look at my proc content anyway.
Okay.
So
this is extremely helpful. Thank you, Shay.
Yeah, not a problem.
So I'm gonna stop recording and.